everyone, and welcome to the Cultivate podcast through the Grove Church. I am Charlie Lofton, the pastor there, and we are so thankful that you are joining us today and have a special guest here with us today, Scott Sutton. What's up, man?
Good. It's all right.
Local expert. He's an elder at the Grove Church, so give him a point for that. Been going to the Grove longer than me. Get a point for that.
Right. Yeah.
What do you, to be honest, maybe you know, what are you most known for at the Grove?
No shoes.
No shoes. Yeah. Never wear shoes to the Grove. Get a point for that. Where'd you go to school?
Went to Baylor.
You still
Baylor
root for their sports teams?
I do.
See, okay, so now you've lost almost all those points.
But when in Rome, I do cheer for Arkansas Razorbacks. So it's
except head to head.
Except head to head. Yeah, head to head. I'm wearing my green and gold.
We can all agree we don't like Texas.
Yeah, no, it's
down with Texas.
Yeah, Texas A&M more so than University of Texas, but both of them can go down for all I care.
All right, okay, perfect. We got to find common ground here. And I was half joking when I said that you're an expert, but actually on this topic that we're talking about and what we're going to be doing over the next 3 weeks, talking a little bit about Mormonism, the Church of Latter-day Saints. And honestly, I mean, I do consider you an expert. Do you consider yourself an expert, kind of like on just kind of your knowledge and understanding of what they believe, who they are?
Yeah, kind of an unwitting expert. I didn't seek out to become an expert in this, but I've just been, over the years, just had a lot of opportunities, probably in the last 20 years, a lot of opportunities to be friends with, meet with missionaries. And so over the course of that, have spent a lot of time studying their scriptures, our scriptures, history. And so I've kind of fallen into this. I didn't seek this out, but it's definitely something that I'm thankful for and happy to share with anyone who's wanting the same.
That's cool. We'll spend some time in the second episode kind of exploring that a little bit. I would love to hear more of that story of just kind of what's kind of drawn you into this and kind of your heart behind that. But before we do that, we should just kind of talk about what is it we're talking about. We talk about Mormons and you brought this up to me, right? You reached out to me and said that in Bentonville, is that right? They are about to dedicate a new temple.
That's right. It's a big deal.
And it's about to be kind of a big, like a publicity campaign, you think, that's coming from this?
Yeah, that's right. So they only have I believe it's less than 200 temples worldwide. So to get one here is a big deal. And a temple, we can get a little more into this at the right time, but a temple is different from a church. You know, they have their little church meeting houses, but the temple is this ultra sacred space. And so to have one here, the closest ones are Oklahoma City, Kansas City, St. Louis. And so you think about putting one here in Bentonville, like that's the league that we're on. And so with that, because they view it as like their most sacred space, and also to kind of, once they dedicate it, it's shut off to the public. So they kind of do this 2-3 week campaign where they open it to the public. You can walk around in it, not all the rooms of it, but most of the rooms, and just get to see more about it. Of course, they have tons of people on hand ready to answer every question and invite you to church and get baptized. But knowing that they're going to be doing this big PR stunt to try to drive people in for this visitation period, the temple being such a big, high-profile addition to our community, I just know over the next few months they're going to be on social media, in person. They're going to be out and about, and feel like it's a good opportunity to just pause and talk about what do they believe when they say that they love Jesus too. What does that mean? Okay. And as Christians, how do we handle that?
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, so I think it's good because I don't know. I think we got some people who maybe are confused about who they are, maybe just not have any awareness at all. And like you said, would just think, oh, this is just another Christian group or another religious group. And so for a lot of people who have some familiarity with Mormons, one of the top descriptors that some people would use would be to describe Mormonism as a cult, right? Mormonism is cult. I guess maybe I should ask this question. We always talk about Mormons. Sometimes I think that's not the name they want to go by.
That's right.
Is it offensive to call them Mormons, or is it just not their preferred name? Because I think they go by LDS.
Right. Yeah, that's actually a really relevant question to a lot of this, because so the name Mormon comes from the angel who revealed the plates to Joseph Smith. And so it's a book. It's a chapter. It's a book within their Book of Mormon. It's called Mormon, and they are they go by that name because of the revelation. They went by the name for a long time. They even had PR campaigns called "And I'm a Mormon," where they would do these interviews with people, athletes or actors, musicians who had like a pop culture appeal, and then we kind of end it with "And I'm a Mormon." And so for a while they embraced that term. But a few years ago, the prophet revealed that it was giving it was giving glory to the wrong person.
Okay.
And so they now want to be called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, not Mormons. And so
Which that's a mouthful.
A
so then
mouthful.
that goes to LDS.
Yeah, exactly.
Short term for.
Yeah, and even LDS, they'll kind of waver on, but definitely that's more preferred than Mormon in this phase of their history.
Okay, so it's not. You're not insulting them by calling them that. It's just, they kind of, for lack of a better word, had a rebranding.
Exactly.
Okay, gotcha. So let's just say LDS, Latter-day Saints, Mormons. If some people say they're a cult, but before we even ask you the question, do you agree with that? I guess we should come up with a definition. How would you define the word cult?
Yeah, that one. I've been thinking about that a little bit over the years with this, especially like, and what do we define as a cult? Because I think in pop culture, a cult can be everything from drinking the Kool-Aid mass suicide to Eyes Wide Shut, the movie where they have this like super secretive society doing.
Dude, if
all
you
kinds
start
of
making pop culture references, we're gonna have a great time here over the next few episodes. I'm always down.
Right.
Sorry.
So exactly, I figured that nothing gets past you there. So so there's such a broad array of like what we call a cult that I feel like sometimes I refrain a little bit from lumping Mormonism in that bucket, just because it's not either of those things. It's not mass suicide cult. It's not super secret, sketchy millionaire cult either. But it is something. When we look at like what is a cult, just historically, what are they? It's typically a group that shoots off from a mainstream religion. They kind of will hyper focus on a certain ideal that they want to really drive. And so maybe it's end times, or maybe it's in the case of Mormonism, they have Joseph Smith who said, all the churches are wrong. I have the truth. Follow me.
Right.
And so they kind of latch on to this, like all the mainstream is wrong. We have the truth. And they start to seclude themselves, say, you can't trust anything you hear from the outside. And so in those terms, it is a cult. And so, as we think about historically, as they become, they're 12 million members large now. So you can't really call them a splinter sect. They're really their own religion. So I tend to think of it as its own religion, but at its source, it started as this kind of offshoot that latched onto the personality of Joseph Smith, and everything he taught was on equal footing as the Bible and church history. So in that sense, they are.
Yeah. Okay. So the two, like you said, the two primary ways that word gets used in Christian circles, again, like you said, is the Eyes Wide Shut, the drinking the Kool-Aid, Branch Davidians, kind of something that's kind of defined around secrecy.
Yeah.
Where maybe you present one face to the public, and as you're recruiting people, you're telling, hey, this is what we're about. And it isn't until you get in that you find out what everything is about. And use a lot of social pressure to kind of a lot of, again, us against the world kind of things. And so, again, maybe not be as tense as Branch Davidians or Heaven's Gate, but there seems to be some of those sorts of things. Like what you get on the front end is not necessarily what you're getting on the back end.
That's right.
And there is a lot of, not completely secluded from society, but even as you were describing the temple, you can come right now. But once we dedicate it, then you're not even going to be able to come into the space.
Exactly.
And then the other way that Christians at least use the word cult is, we think about a Christian cult is like, it has some connections to Christianity. So there is a Jesus part to it. But it is wrong enough. It's wrong enough in the worst ways. It's like about the things that really are essential to Christian doctrine. While you may have a fondness for Jesus, there may be some similarities. The Venn diagram may overlap to some degree, but where there's disagreement, it's like real disagreement, not when should we baptize somebody and can we speak in tongues or not, or those kinds of things, but like core level. So it's Christian-ish, but it's a cult, not necessarily because of its exclusionary tactics or its secretiveness, but because you're wrong about the worst things to be wrong about.
And at that point, I feel that's such a good thing, because in so many ways, the terminology sounds the same. They'll say the name Jesus. They use the Bible. They talk about Jesus saving. They'll say the sentence, Jesus saved me from my sins. And so on so many things, you can be in agreement. But the further you draw into the depths of it, the kind of the more secretive aspects of it, the more you learn, and the more you learn that those statements, while they say the name Jesus, who they consider Jesus is a world apart from who Jesus was. the statement, Jesus saved me from my sins, is a world apart from when we say that same tagline. So that's right, that the deeper you get into it, the more you realize that we're using the same words, but it's a completely different set of concepts.
Right. So one of the things, again, you've been around at the Grove longer than me, and you were here when I got here almost 13 years ago. And so, and as an elder, we're in agreement on this idea that we as a church really want to be as unifying as possible. We don't want to bring more division amongst Christians. Like we don't, hey, just because this denomination is more formal than us, that's great. Just because they baptize babies, okay, that's fine. They speak in tongues and we don't, that's fine. Like we really want to create this kind of unified Christian team. And I think it has surprised some people that a couple of times in some sermons over the last several months, we've kind of been discussing some theological issues, that I'll take a shot at Mormon theology.
Mm-hmm.
And that and it seems like maybe you've already kind of answered this. And so are they just another Christian denomination?
Yeah.
In your mind?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And in fact, even if you go back to the founding of it, so Joseph Smith is the founder of Mormonism. He has a whole story that, changed multiple times over the years of his life. He had a few different versions of this story, but the root of this story is that he actually saw that all the denominations of Christianity were wrong, were false, and that God was calling him to start something completely distinct from that. And if you read some of his early writings, he actually calls Christianity and the denominations of Christianity an abomination.
Okay.
And so even in his own words, the founder's own words, he didn't see himself as another denomination of Christianity, but as a restoration of this true religion that's been lost for 2,000 years. And so I don't know that it's necessarily combative or off-putting for us to say that they're not another denomination. I mean, their own founder started this saying, we're not, these denominations are false, they're wrong. I'm starting the true religion. And we can just take him at face value that he was starting a new religion there.
So it seems to me, and maybe I'm wrong, it seems to me like maybe some of the interactions that I've had makes me think that they're wanting me to believe.
Right.
That they're just another denomination. Maybe like the best one, maybe the one that kind of sits above all of us. But hey, it's just like just a very small step from whatever version of Christianity I'm in to what they are. It seems like at least they're presenting like they're just another. Have you experienced that? Or is that just just depends on who you talk to? Or are they most like, oh, no, man, we're not Christian. we're LDS.
Yeah, no, you're spot on with that. And so I think that's also getting to another facet of Mormonism, that it changes over time. It's less than 200 years old. I've been interacting with Mormons for about 20 years, and even in my 20 years, I've seen this big shift from being very, when we meet with missionaries, they can be very like I'm going to convince you of the truthfulness of what I believe, to now it's like, we love Jesus, you love Jesus, and then the line you hear now is that all religions have some good in them, and we like to take the good from everything and give you better. And so the message has changed it has evolved over time from, you're an abomination to the founder, right, to now, we love Jesus, you can love Jesus too. We'll just give you more about Jesus that you didn't have before. And so that's the way I think I don't know if it's strategic that they are wanting to, if they feel the closer they get, the easier it is to bring people over, or if it's just a natural evolution that potentially a softening at leadership of, we're not going to cling to some of these really weird or harder to digest doctrines. We'll just kind of focus on the Jesus aspect of it and keep everyone happy. So I don't know if it's
right,
if it's strategic or just a natural evolution.
Yeah, so it might be a marketing technique, or it may be a slow evolution, right, of where, hey, we're trying to be a little more mainstream than we have. Like really, we want to, but regardless of whether or not that, we are in agreement that this is not a Christian denomination. Right. This is something else entirely. And so if we'll use this kind of definition, like, this pop definition of a Christian cult, where it's like, it has Christian-like qualities. It uses the Bible. It talks about Jesus, but it's off in some really significant ways. Now, it'd be real easy. Maybe we'll get an opportunity over these next few episodes to talk about some of the kind of the really weird stuff that's kind of out there in pop culture. But let's set that aside for a little bit. Like, what are the real, in your opinion, the real core differences of Christianity and Mormonism that makes it its own religion? Like, what are the core things that we look at? Oh, like when we hear those, like, okay, now I agree with Scott. This is not Christian.
That's right. Yeah. No, that's good. And I think that's important too, because I think a lot of times, as I've heard Christians engaging Mormons, there's focusing on things like, well, why don't you drink caffeine? Or don't we have freedom in Christ? And, while you can have that conversation, that the whole phrase of, in our essentials, we have unity, and the non-essentials, there's liberty. Whether or not I drink caffeine, there might be Christians who choose to abstain from caffeine for one reason or another. And so that's really focusing on a non-essential. And so you're right that like we can focus on that, or, the legalism around tithing exactly 10% of everything you make. But those things I feel are non-essential issues. So when you want to really focus on, to your point, is this a denomination or is this outside of Christianity, focusing on those essentials? And right. I kind of like to boil the essentials down to kind of 3 questions. You've actually articulated kind of some of your essentials in the same way. Is just these questions of like, who is God, who is man, and kind of what's the point? And so when you can answer those 3 questions, you can start to really quickly, or maybe not so quickly, if there's something that's really buried deep, see that the answer to those questions couldn't be more different than if you were speaking to a Buddhist about who is God, who is man, what's the point? And so on the God side, and we can get a little more into this, they believe that God was once a human being who lived on another planet, who was sinful, just like us, who needed a savior, who had a God of his own that he worshiped. And because he lived the right way, and we can kind of get into their plan of salvation, another point too, but because he lived the right way, he earned the right to keep progressing to become a God. And that is the God of this world. And he procreated spirits and before he sent people down to earth, with those spirits, and that he's giving us the ability to progress to Godhood as well. And so when you start to talk about that God, that couldn't be any more different than the God of the Bible, who was and is never changing, who is omniscient, who knows no other gods besides himself. You couldn't have a more different God. When we talk about who is man, you think about us as being these spirit children who have come down and have, the lifetime here to prove ourselves worthy of godhood, to live certain ways, to check certain boxes. That couldn't be a more different view of who we are and what God wants for us and for his creation. And so that's a very high level run through. But when we talk about the essentials, we're talking about very different God, man, and purpose conversations.
Okay, I want to slow down here a little bit, because you haven't said anything that I didn't know. Like I'm aware of all of that, and I don't have near as much experience with Mormonism as you do, but I've certainly studied it pretty extensively. But I would imagine that as you're just kind of popping off some of this stuff, that depending on if you're running or driving right now, that there was probably maybe not a literal kind of screech moment, but something like, I'll make sure that we're all clear on what you just said. So there's another planet in some other multiverse universe somewhere where there were people that were living life very similar maybe to what we did, maybe different technology or whatever. But and whoever this, and there was a person on that planet that followed whatever the rules were for that planet to such a level that whoever the god of that planet was deemed him good enough to become god of his own planet.
That's right.
And that person who is now a god is the god that is overseeing our planet.
That's right.
That is what you just said.
That is what I just said.
And we're not being mean by saying that. Oh man, they're weird. They think God was a person on another planet. Now we just got to. Now he's having spirit babies on this planet. This is not. We're not insulting anybody. We're not intentionally twisting what they're saying just a little bit to make them seem crazier than what they are. That's
right. And I feel like a lot of this to the point about mean-heartedness versus just it is what it is. If I go back to, again, the person of Joseph Smith, and there's so much to unpack with who he was before he founded Mormonism, the context he grew up in. Family was really important to him. He lost a brother at a young age. It was very devastating to his family to have lost that child. And I believe that a lot of doctrine today is an evolution of, as Joseph Smith got in his mind that he was receiving revelation from God, he would say things, and then almost like you had to retrofit doctrine to fit the things that he said. And so he had this, I think, this eternal view of we'll see Samuel again, the brother who passed, we'll see him again someday. So what does that look like? And not only will we see him again someday, but we will have this eternal family bond. And so the Mormons will speak a lot about eternal families. And so in order to make that work, they had to look at, well, how's that, if we become God someday, doesn't that feel a little bit heretical? Well, no. Okay, so this God, the God of our planet, must have had that same path of his own. And so we even have a heavenly mother. So when we talk about heavenly father, and Mormonism is a heavenly mother as well, who procreated those spirits. So it's for the best reasons, I believe. If Joseph Smith had these, every conviction he felt, he believed was revelation from God, it's almost like the church had to then retrofit a theology to fit those convictions. And I think that's where a lot of this emerged from. It wasn't necessarily from a, man, we're gonna really fool people, and as Christians,
Right.
not gawking at it. We can appreciate kind of maybe where the root desire was for that, but at the same time, call it out that this is not the God of the Bible.
Okay, so then we were, as people, pre-existent spirit children. I mean, so this God is having spirit babies.
That's right.
With the Heavenly Mother.
Right.
So we existed in some sort of spirit form previously in wherever plane God and the Heavenly Mother exist.
Right.
And then as people are becoming people, whatever that spirit is coming to inhabit me at some point when I'm in my mother's womb or something. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I could talk about this particular aspect of it all day, but that's okay. So then in this scenario, then who is Jesus?
Yeah, and that's a really good point as well. So I think that's another really clear distinction where Jesus and Satan, by the way, are both just siblings of us and our spiritual siblings of us. So
were they like the firstborn ones?
Exactly. So Jesus being the firstborn, Satan, I don't know if he was necessarily the secondborn, but was not the firstborn. And so a lot of times when biblical language talks about firstborn, Jesus being the firstborn, that's what they're attributing it to. It's not the firstborn from the dead, the way that Christians would, the first to have risen, the firstborn.
The inheritor is really what the Bible means when it says firstborn. It's talking about the one who inherits things. It's not talking about being born. But
exactly.
Anyways.
Yep. And so, and that Jesus, and so God had this plan for we're going to create the world. And as in our spiritual forms, Satan came to God the Father and told God the Father, well, we'll just force everyone to believe in you. And through that, everyone will be saved. And Jesus said, no, free will is too important. God, you should give people free will. And then I'll go and die for them so that they can believe in me. And through their own agency or free will, come back to you. And so there's kind of this war in the spiritual realm, our spiritual lives, where Satan took a third of the other spirit children with him. And then who was left is you and I. So we got the right to inherit these bodies. That gives us, our first kind of ticket onto this ticket toward this becoming gods ourselves one day. And Jesus dying for our sins is really more of him coming down to basically buy our next ticket for us that we can raise again someday.
Okay, so there's again, I don't want to necessarily get lost in the weeds here, but I do have a follow-up question of some sort. Do I have locked somewhere memories of this happening? Was I involved in this in some way? Was I like, yeah, Jesus, let's do that? Or was I kind of like Jesus had awareness of himself and was making decisions, but I was still just kind of a unformed spiritual person. I was kind of getting swept up in whether, or was I like I have you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, no. And actually, and by their theology, you actually were fully conscious. You were one of the valiant spirits who stood by Jesus' side in the pre-life, stood in however spiritual beings stand, but you were by his side in the spiritual life. And then when you became born, you kind of lost, memory of all that so that you could start this kind of new test of...
Am I going to get it back?
So potentially you've already had that revealed to you, but maybe in the post-life, they don't really get into that too much. It's really more focusing on the fact that you're even here meant that you were a valiant spirit in the pre-life, whether you remember it or not.
So I've already passed a test.
Yes.
So that's good news.
Right.
And now I've got more
tests.
Okay. So I was afraid of this. In that as you and I have been talking and I was sending things out to you saying, hey, let's do this. And I sent you an outline. I don't know. But part of I was going back and forth. Maybe we don't have enough material here for 3 episodes, or maybe we've got so much here that we have 7 episodes and we're trying to get into 3. So I like to keep these things with somewhere between 25 to 30. So I think we're just going to hit pause right here.
Great.
And just kind of, I think, because we kind of getting at just kind of the understanding of what Mormonism is as far as its connection to Christianity in general, talking about in terms of a cult. And then we've begun to explore what I feel like are some of the key aspects that distinguish it, which make it something that is not just different, but I would say different in a dangerous way. It's perception of who God is and its perception of who Jesus is. So what I'd like for us to do is come back and talk more about what salvation is in this context. And then maybe start getting a little bit behind the scenes of like, okay, well, once they get you in, what happens? And then we can then after that, maybe in the episode after that, just talk a little bit about your future, like your past, your heart for them, and maybe some of like how you think those of us who are less equipped than you are should interact with them.
Sounds great.
Okay, great. So thanks so much for joining us, whether, how we ended up here. Appreciate that you were here. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, anything about this, we'd love to hear them. You can always email me at charlie@thegrovechurch.org. Would love to hear it. And if it's a Scott-related question, I will beep bop, pass it right on to him. And if you are new to the Grove, or you're not connected with us all, we'd love to know who you are. And so you can contact us. You can go to thegrovechurch.org/connect. Let us know that you're listening. And if you are local, we'd love to see you on a Sunday morning. Get all the information about our service times and everything there. And if you're not local and you'd love to connect and do the same thing, go to that same website and you can stream with us. We're always streaming our 10:30 service, and we would love to interact with you, help you any way that we can, either in person or online. So please do that. Again, I'm Charlie, the lead pastor there. We got Scott Sutton, one of our elders here. And thank you so much for joining us.